welcome. I'm going to get started because I know I'm going to be quite tight on time. So as people sort of just come in, hi, I'll crack on. So thank you very much for coming along to my session today. Øredev, first time I've been here. Already the conference seems absolutely awesome. So I know there's lots of great talks to come along to and choose. So I really appreciate you coming along to this one. My name is Chris Smith, and I'm going to talk to you today about 4 years of self-selection reteaming at Redgate. So I'm going to talk to you about why you might consider deliberately changing up your teams when traditional wisdom tells us that stable teams are best. I'm going to talk about why and how Redgate ran its first self-selection reteaming process. And then I'm going to talk to you about how 4 years down the line, what we've seen, what's happened, what's been the result. And I'm fortunate today to be speaking to you after Heidi Helfand, who spoke earlier in maybe that room about dynamic reteaming in fast-changing teams. But Heidi, I first met Heidi and first saw Heidi talk at a conference not unlike this one about 6 years ago. And it's fantastic to be talking after her now. Some of what I'm going to talk about is kind of a case study on some of the ideas from her book. So I'm also going to be able to build on what she said earlier. But I'd like to know how many people went along to Heidi's talk, so I know what I need to spend time on. So who went to Heidi's talk? Loads of people, but not everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a little bit of what Heidi spoke about, but I'll use different words. So if you've been in Heidi's talk, then there will be a little bit of covering ground before we get into sort of how Redgate's done it, but hopefully that's still going to be interesting for you all. Okay, so who am I and why am I stood here? So my name, as I said, is Chris Smith. I've been working with humans building software for about almost 25 years, which was terrifying when I worked backwards and found out that was the case. I was a .NET software developer for about 13 years, and for 12 years, a bit of overlap being developer and leader at the same time, I've been leading teams and leading groups of teams. My current, you probably recognize me from the picture, I should think. Not looking at the camera. So my current role is head of product delivery at Redgate Software. That's a software house in Cambridge in the UK. And that means I'm responsible for the health and efficacy of 16 development teams we have at the moment. The people in those teams, have they got what they need? Are they developing? Are they kind of fulfilled? And are we delivering against the company's goals and missions? That's what I'm about. And I absolutely love teams. Really, really love teams. Always have. And I've been fortunate enough at Redgate to help build some really principled and successful agile development teams. And hopefully providing a fulfilling place for the folks in those teams to work. And for the last 4 years, we've been giving the people in our teams a really strong influence over which team in our organization they are part of. So it's my we've not done that, sorry, it's not just that because it's some altruistic imperative that it's good for the people. It is good for the people, but we found it's better for the organization. And it's better for the business if we do that. So I'm going to talk about those things. And my kind of secret mission today, it's not very secret, I'm telling you, so it's not secret at all, is to encourage other organizations to try this, to try giving people a stronger say on where they work within an organization. It's not crazy, it does work. So again, might cover a little bit of the ground that Heidi spoke about earlier, so I'll do it quickly. What's reteaming? Well, it's when team composition changes, when your team membership changes. It's always happened, it always will happen. We've maybe not named it reteaming before. People join and leave teams. We saw a show of hands in Heidi's talk, seeing how many teams have changed over the last 6 or 12 months. People leave and join organizations. And organizations choose to create new teams, split teams, disband teams. Teams move around all the time. They just do. It's inevitable. I spoke to a developer a couple of years ago at Redgate. And they told me they enjoyed their team before. They enjoyed being a part of that team. But they said one new member of the team had come along, so a new senior software engineer had joined, and they said their team was almost completely different. You know, they'd really taken on, they brought with them that person, ensemble programming, mob programming, and they were really getting involved in that. They were thinking about architecture more, writing more architectural decision records. Even the games they were playing in social time were different, just from one person joining that team. So even one person causes kind of a reteaming. But what I'm mainly spending this session is yes, change happens to us. People choose to leave organizations when we wouldn't necessarily ask them to. They join and leave teams. But but can we do change deliberately? Can we use change as a function for good? So this is what I'm talking about here, is where we've deliberately changed teams, certainly in a wider way than we otherwise have to. So why would we do that? Why would we break up a team of development superheroes and form another group like this? In the case of the Justice League, I don't know why you'd break them up. Maybe you've only seen the first cut of Zack Snyder's film. You're like, I'm not going to be in another one of those. Batman, he's decided to move and wants to join up with Scooby-Doo. I don't know. And to be honest, 5 years ago, I'd have said this was kind of foolish. Deliberately changing your teams when you were aiming for stable teams was a kind of crazy thing to do, let alone asking people to have a strong say on where in that structure they ended up. Because stable teams are best, right? We all know it. Stable teams are best. But are they? So in the UK, we've got this saying, this sort of statement of received wisdom, I don't know, or conventional wisdom. That's it. And an example of that might be you should feed a cold and starve a fever. So sort of conventional wisdom that is held to be true commonly, but it isn't actually true. So do you have that across Europe? Do you feed a cold and starve a fever? No? Good, because it's rubbish. So I looked this up, and it dates back, that saying, this is well held in the UK. You can speak to people, especially of an older generation, they will tell you this, is it dates back to a dictionary entry in 1574, where someone made this up. So it's not exactly cutting-edge medical science. And it turns out you shouldn't starve a fever, because your body is fighting an infection. You should, if you can eat. It's better. But this is kind of a piece of received wisdom that's held to be true, a bit like stable teams. So well, these things sound right. They sound sensible. You know, stable teams with stable membership perform better. Keep your teams the same for predictability. So your velocity is consistent. You can use it to do a burn down, as Alan showed, which you shouldn't do. That's a different talk. But like, I don't believe we should necessarily optimize teams for predictability, but that's a different talk at a different conference, so we won't do that now. And we don't want to repeat the overhead of starting a new team. So the whole Tuckman model of forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning that's been added at the end. We don't want to keep having to redo that every time. Which sounds kind of true, right? But I think in our current industry at the moment, in the current movement, it's not about sort of short-lived project teams so much. It's not about, you know, a 6-month team here and a 3-month team there. We're just looking for stream-aligned teams. We're looking for long-lived teams, product teams. So sometimes teams don't adjourn. And what do? They just get into performing and just stay there forever? Does that happen? Maybe teams stagnate. Rather than, this doesn't happen all the time, but maybe than staying in performance forever, perhaps there's a stagnation that can occur, an ossification. Teams get so rigid. I remember joining a team, a long time ago now, but joined a team. I joined as a team leader, and their team leader, they'd been a hugely successful team, full of absolutely brilliant developers. Each one of them was the best developer I'd ever worked with, yeah. Their team leader had moved on to greater things. They delivered a new product to market. They were the apple of the CEO's eye. They were a fantastic team. They're on sprint 43. So they've done 2-week sprints. That's how many sprints. I mean, I don't know what they were going to keep calling themselves as they kept going through the sprints. But when I joined the team, I saw something very surprising. Again, these are brilliant individuals, but I saw test working way ahead of development. So by the end of the sprint, developer had their feet up, and the testers were all over the place trying to get these tickets done so we could actually get something out the door. We had dysfunction in our weekly planning session where we spent every hour anyone had in the next week as if that had ever happened in the history of humankind. Like, just really dysfunctional planning. We had insanely long user interface test runs. A user interface test run took 14 hours. Right, useless retrospectives, like completely perfunctory, just the same activity again and again, driving no real action, and complex and poorly understood code base. If you weren't there when it was built, you really didn't have any kind of clue why it was doing what it was doing. But these were brilliant people. Why were they acting like? Why was the team like that? Well, perhaps they got a collective blindness. So Matthew Syed, in his brilliant book, Rebel Ideas, talks about how groups of people working together if they've got similar background and similar perspectives, can have a collective blindness where they miss the same things. His book is fantastic, talking about the importance of diversity in teams. I really recommend it. But in this case, he says that if people start working together a long time, their views can start to sort of align. They can have, as I say, collective blindness. It might feel great to be in the team because everyone agrees with everything you've said. Like, it feels really fantastic because we're all agreeing all the time. But he argues that maybe performance isn't necessarily all that it can be mediocre results because there isn't that diversity of ideas within the group. So other potential drawbacks of stable teams. Collective blindness, as I said. Experts stuck in teams, as Heidi said. Sometimes, quite often, you've got an expert in a team who knows everything about the product, everything about the tech stack. They're fantastic. They can never, ever leave that team, or the team will stop, right? So that person, sometimes it can feel for them easier to leave the organization than to move teams within an organization, because they're so important. And as staying in a team can reduce your opportunity to learn. In an organization of a certain size, there's different things going on. There are different tech stacks, different products, different life cycles of products. There's an opportunity there to learn different things. And if you don't move across teams, you stick in a team, you're potentially limiting what you can learn about. So you can see lack of opportunity to learn in stable teams. You can also see siloed teams in an organization. We had in the past such strong teams, such well-built teams, they just didn't talk to anyone else. They didn't need anyone else. So you had teams that were completely independent. And then it was very difficult to get those teams to act in concert together, to align, to have the same shared purpose, and to move together because there were such strong individual stable teams. And they had lack of connectedness across the organization as a result of that. So I'm arguing here for not just focusing on a single team and the needs of that team and how it needs to be stable and stay together. Think about the needs of the group of teams that you're working with, or the needs of the organization of teams that think about both the short term, and the stability and the kind of efficacy of that single team, but how is it at a larger scale, and how are you balancing the needs in the future as well? So, as Heidi introduced, and I won't go through this again, she talks about, inspired by liberating structures and panarchy, a different way of looking at the team life cycle rather than sort of Tuckman's model. And what I'm talking about quite a lot with stable teams, stagnant teams, is that they've got stuck in a rigidity trap. There's no room for new ideas. How we do things is now laid down, and actually we're all agreeing that it's a really great place to be. And perhaps we might need some creative destruction in order to put experts back into the system, people opportunities to learn, and move around that sort of infinite loop. Okay. How we do reteaming at Redgate. So when we do reteaming, we've got a bit of a choice, and again, Heidi touched on this. This is inspired by a diagram in her book, where you have like a spectrum of freedom when you're doing reteaming, when you're changing up teams. You have one side where someone at the top has full control and moves people around a board like chess pieces, right? And they can do that with the best intentions. They can understand people's desires, they can talk to folks, they can be really friendly, but ultimately the control is with them, and they're moving people around. And then on the other side, we have full freedom, where perhaps people can choose whenever they want to form a new team, to split off, to try a new thing, to move into a different group, and just based on their desires. And both of these extremes can cause this face. Like worried and anxiety. Because on the far right, was it the right? I can't remember, it doesn't matter. The top down, that physiologically causes humans anxiety. Like the amygdala system, the limbic system is there to protect us, to ensure that we survive. And when some manager that we might not know very well moves us around this organization, it's someone causing us, putting us in harm's way, taking us out of our security of our current tribe and throwing us somewhere else. It physiologically can cause the kind of fight, flight, or fright sort of freeze response. Like we're wired to be that way. And on the other side, full freedom. Well, this approach causes this face to leaders, right, and senior managers. Like, you're going to ask people where they want to go. it's going to be carnage, chaos. Everyone's going to leave that team. Everyone's going to join the greenfield team that's doing a new project. Who's going to think about the needs of the business? Who's going to think about the needs of the customers? It's insane. And then you've also got anxiety from the people involved. Now, self-selection, sort of full freedom approaches can be characterized by a big old session, maybe 2 hours, where people come into a room and you can sign up for a team on a sheet on the wall. It's not always the case, but that kind of happens often in a self-selection. And that can be very, very scary for people wandering in that you've got to, in that next 2 hours, get yourself in a team that you're going to be in for the next year. People that are low on confidence or struggling with imposter syndrome, like I am right now. People neurodiverse, folks that are introverted, may find it difficult in that setup to get on the team that they would like to be on, that they would need to be on. Other folks, much more confident people, might be able to just stride in and put their name up on the team they want, and they kind of dominate that. And I'm not sure that's fair. I'm sure there's a better way than causing that anxiety, and also like favouring people that already have quite a lot of advantages in life. Can we make this fairer? So for Redgate, we're sort of here. We're sort of that far along. Mostly towards full freedom, but not all the way, which I'll talk about later. Okay, now a short story. So when I first moved to Cambridge, I moved in with to share a house with two people I didn't really know very well. They've become good friends since, but I didn't know them. And one of our housemates had a curious disregard for the health of his other housemates. So the kind of thing he did was he stored raw chicken above salad in the fridge and gave my housemate food poisoning. He cultivated mushrooms from the carpet of my bathroom while I was away on holiday. Like literally there was fungus growing out of it when I came back. And one night at a bar at a local pub, he told me, he said, "Chris, I've got to be honest, I knocked your toothbrush off the shelf and into the toilet." So it's okay. I picked it out and I put it back in the jar. Okay, good. Oh, and I did that 2 weeks ago. So I've been brushing my teeth with that for 2 weeks. So I share this because, that's genuinely true, terrifyingly, is sometimes it's important that you understand the full context of something before deciding what to do. So do you A, throw your toothbrush away, or B, throw your toothbrush away, scrub your mouth out, and never talk to your so-called friend ever again? So I am going to talk quite a bit of detail of the context where our version of reteaming came up. So how do we work at Redgate? Because I think that's important for you before you decide what to do next. So we're an organisation of roughly this many people. We make software for database professionals, for DBA and database developers. And our tools and services help those folks create, maintain, operate like the databases that back up so many of our important systems. We have a portfolio of about 20 products. And we have 16 development teams at the moment. And our teams are typically like this. So we've deliberately chosen to have similar sized teams, quite small teams. We've got 5 developers, we've got a team lead, we've got a product designer, and we form a leadership trio around every team that helps guide and support that team in getting towards their purpose and meeting their goals. So product designer, team lead, and product manager form that trio. We also have this deliberately articulated principle at Redgate. There's lots of ways to make software, there's lots of ways to organize teams, but this is a principle that backs up us. The best way for us to make software products for us is by engaging teams empowered with freedom to act, clear purpose, and a drive to learn. Now we say that, and we put it on slides, and we also try and choose practices and processes that support that. We try and look through that lens. And some of you might recognize elements of that from the book Drive by Dan Pink. Now Pink in his book introduces us to self-determination theory and argues that you don't just unlock performance and engagement in staff by providing more money for them. That's important to give them what they need. But also what you really need is to give them autonomy, which speaks to their desire to be self-directed. Mastery, that speaks to their need to get better, to improve, to hone their craft. And purpose, which Alan talked about earlier, which is purpose, which people need to understand why what they're doing is important, how it links to bigger goals, how it maybe links up to a bigger company goal or a bigger sort of movement. So we believe in this principle and we choose things behind that. We also have products across a life cycle. So we have earlier stage products and later stage products. And this characterizes the work that goes on in the product teams that are working in here. So on the far side there, you have an explore teams where teams are trying to find product market fit. And you have teams there that are trying to iterate really quickly and trying to learn, maybe making mistakes, throwing work away, giving up on product ideas and starting new work, talking to lots and lots of users. And that work can be really engaging from some folks. That's what they want to do. That's what some developers really are driven by, is creating these new products. And then if you go to sustain state, we have products with many more users than those earlier stage products. Focusing there and thinking about performance, sort of sustainability, maintainability, lowering the cost of ownership. There's some really gnarly problems in there to get to grips with this. And other folks like that kind of work. There is an array and a whole spectrum of work across these teams that speaks to different people. So perhaps we should lean into that. So okay, why do we want to deliberately change up our teams at Redgate? So firstly, we want to change how we invest our teams each year. And we've been quite a stable sized company. We had maybe one team a year. But we want to change what the teams do. So we invest more in this product or less in that product, or we split the team to create more investment in certain areas. So we do, every year, we have a strategy process where we decide what our aims are going to be for the next year. And yeah, we tweak that along the way, but we try and take a deliberate step back yearly, annually to do that. And that maps out to changes in what teams would be asked to achieve. Again, changing teams up aligns with our principles of giving people opportunity, because all those things are on offer: autonomy, mastery, and purpose when you're changing teams. The autonomy to choose where you work within the structure, the opportunity to get better at a skill, or to go and try and add a new skill to your kind of tool set by changing teams. And purpose, there's different purposes across those teams which speak to different people. So they're on offer. So it aligns with our principles to change teams around and to ask them where they'd like to go. We found that we had very strong teams, but again, we found that siloing. So we wanted wider connectedness across the organization. And we thought that would help spread knowledge and best practice throughout our engineering team. So we found that we had really great practice in a number of our teams, but it was not spreading. And guilds and communities of practice wasn't quite doing it for us, and different aspects to share it. So what we wanted to do is people to move and take those best practices with them to introduce into other teams. And we felt that it was an important part of enabling personal growth and development, keeping people feeling fulfilled and content at Redgate, which hopefully means they'll stick around. Okay, so this is how we do it. I'm going to go in quite a lot of detail about how we do this. So I'm going to have some water before I get to it. So how we do it at Redgate, where we're trying to favour people's influence on where they work. So firstly, we share as early as we possibly can what the plan is, what's mapping out for the next year, what teams we're going to have, where we're going to invest, why we're going to invest there, maybe what teams we're going to stop, and what opportunities are out there. So we do that a little bit earlier than we typically. There might be some uncertainty here, some variability, but it's important that we share it as soon as we can with as many people as we can. So we have a presentation where we talk about this with all hands. And then we get the trios in place. So we talk to all the trios, those leadership roles, the team lead, the product designer, and the product manager. Where would they like to be in the organization? We don't do it because they're most important. We do it because they're really vital to light the rest of the process up for everyone else. They're going to then go away and do the deep thinking on what that team with this purpose is going to be like over the next year, so that other folks, other engineers and other folks in the process, they get more detail. So we need these trios in place to help light that up. And they do that via something we're calling a team charter, a lightweight canvas where we're asking the trios to call out what this team's going to be like in the next year or so. So on there you can see things like, what is your purpose? What's the impact this is going to have for the company? What do you own? What products do you own? What products don't you own? What's your strategy? What's life going to be like? Are we going to do a lot of ensemble programming, a lot of pair programming? Are we going to have like regular retrospectives to light that up so everyone knows kind of what to expect if they join this team? And on the other side of that, we need, what skills do we actually need? And this is really important. Like, obviously, there is some constraints to a team and on a given purpose in a given product. Perhaps we have to have 2 engineers with Oracle experience. We have to have at least one senior engineer in here. There are some minimum requirements for these teams, and we ask team leads to be honest about that, not to ask for the world, but to ask for really what they think is the bar that we need to hit here. And people do respond to that. People do understand, therefore, which options they have within this system because of what is said on here. So trios get to sort of, make these of themselves and put pictures on and all that kind of things to light them up. But they all produce these team charters. And the team charters are then displayed. So what we have is a 2-hour open session, maybe 3 hours, where all these posters are displayed. They were physical back in the day, and now it's a virtual process, where anyone can drop in and drop out of that session to talk to the trios, to talk to the leadership folks, explore their charters, and really find out a bit more detail about what it's going to be like in those teams. Really explore. It looks a bit like that. Funny mask optional. And then what we do is, we support people in thinking that through. We don't leave them on their own in a corner trying to worry about what they should be doing. We give everybody a one-on-one coaching session with a coach who's away from our sort of management process, or managers from across the organization, a thinking partner to think through what you might want to do. And we ask them to, in sort of tandem, come up with that person's 3 preferences for where they'd like to be in the structure. Do they prefer to stay in their team? Do they prefer to go to this team, that team? What are your preferences for team? We need more than one preference, because we need the ability to make the sort of puzzle fit, that we can create all these functional teams. So we ask for 3 preferences. And importantly, we ask for a 4th thing. We ask for why. What is the driver behind these moves? Because it helps them think through why they're asking for what they're asking for. It's perfectly reasonable to stay in a team because you love it, because you like the people working with, and the product really speaks to you. That's fine, but understand that's why you're staying, right? And also that why will help us if we can't quite find a preference that works in the structure that we've got. That why can help us maybe sniff out some other options that maybe the person wasn't aware of, and we could go back to them. So we have all these preferences, we have the big picture we need to create, and then we have a group of leaders that get together, drawn from, I guess there's 8 or 10 of us, that get together to try and make this puzzle work. And our aim is, can we create, in the latest case, 16 healthy functional teams, basing team membership as much as possible on people's preferences? That's our aim. And I didn't know if it was going to work, but it did, and it has. So we've ended up with then deciding who would go well, sort of settling the preferences down, communicating that back out, and then investing in the kind of things that Heidi talked about earlier, activities and workshops to help teams form quickly. And we've really lent into that idea that teams are going to change all the time, get good at it. So we've got workshops, and we've got activities that we've written down and sort of canned, so team leaders can open those up as soon as their team comes together again, and they can help that process of gelling and getting going quickly. So that's how reteaming works. Time period-wise, helpful axis there. It takes sort of 15 working days from having the charters to going. 15 working days for us at the moment. And that's not 15 working days where there's like down tools, nobody's doing any work. The teams, the previous teams are still doing their work all the way through, and then we switch sort of here. So somebody wants to give me feedback on that slide. That's just a white slide with a load of random icons on Chris. What the hell? So I've tried to break this down into our process. So there's 5 steps. We communicate everything early and openly about what's going to happen in the next year and what our teams want to do. We encourage people to explore all the options. And we coach everybody through that process of thinking where they want to be and getting their preferences. We then collaboratively, as a group of leaders, try and create that team structure. And then we really invest in supporting our new and change teams get going. Okay, so that's what we do. So what happened? Because I didn't know when we first tried it. Well, the good news is we were able to create the teams we needed every time. Each of the 4 years, we were able to create those teams. But really, how many people changed? And how much autonomy did they really have? It was a perfectly reasonable option to choose to stay in your team. That's great, and it's valuable to say, I had the option to move around, and I'm recommitting to this team. I'm going to stick. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't bother asking them. It's important to ask them, even if they want to stay. But how many do you think moved teams? How many think in the first time we ran it, 2018, any guesses on what percentage of people changed teams? Because I hadn't got a clue. 50. 75, gone high there, Alan, good. 20. 10. All the numbers. Okay. It was 33%. Moved teams. That's engineering roles, that's the engineers, that's the team lead, that's the product designer, they moved team, 33%. We were able to meet 77% of first preferences and 97% of first, second, and third preferences. A couple of people we weren't able to meet their need, and we genuinely went back to them and said, look, your why is about, say, learning more React development. This team you didn't talk about is going to be doing React next year. Could that work for you? We're able to find a position they were kind of really comfortable with. But it wasn't their preference, so they don't get a score. Can I come back to questions at the end? Is that okay? Hold on to that one. Is that a one-off? Is that the only first year we fluked it? Turns out not. So the following year, again, about a quarter. And again, 97% of the preferences met. The next year, just over a quarter. So 37%, third. Did I say a quarter? Third. Maths is not my strong point. 98% of first, second, and third preferences. And then last year, 24% moved. And again, we were able to meet quite a lot of first, second, and third preferences. 24%, actually it was 29% of engineers moved, but there was less movement in those leadership roles. So they have, I think, had strong autonomy, but important to know that teams didn't completely disband and everyone left. That didn't happen. So how did people find going in reteaming? I'm going to quicken up now. There was obviously things to improve and things that were good, and they told us that. I really loved this piece of feedback, though. It said it was great to feel involved in the process. You weren't being moved around arbitrarily like some huge machine. So basically, there's the claw from the Toy Story. The claw! And it grabs you and it sort of puts you somewhere else. It did not feel like that, because that's how it felt like before. We couldn't obviously do, in the last couple of years, we did a virtual process, so we couldn't get them to put Post-it notes. And you can't read this slide, but we have surveyed folks to find out what they thought. And the highlights are, vast majority of people are happy with the personal outcome from reteaming, 95%. Respondents were comfortable with the shape of their teams. As a group, we're unanimous at the bottom of saying you should ask people to have where they want to be. They should have strong influence. Everyone agreed. No, everyone never agrees, but they agreed on this. But a significant proportion, can I do the laser? A significant proportion of people, 30%, said they felt anxiety during the process. So they agreed that they felt anxiety. So it's worth stepping back and reflecting on that. Even this process causes anxiety. People being asked where they want to work and moving around teams and finding out what's going to happen causes worry and anxiety. And our job as leaders isn't necessarily to walk away from that. It's to reduce the amount of time that you have uncertainties, to do this process as quickly as possible, to support people through it with those one-on-one coaching sessions. But to reflect there is anxiety. But imagine how much anxiety when somebody you don't really know is moving you around teams and you don't get asked. Probably quite a lot more. Big question is, does software delivery fall off the cliff? No, it doesn't. So we track the 4 key metrics from the State of DevOps report and Accelerate, a fantastic book. You can read what they are. And they're unaffected by reteaming. There's a slight extension of lead time as people are literally moving teams, and a little bit of a drop on deployment frequency, as you'd expect, as people are switching out of teams. But that levels out really, really quickly. And actually, because there's 2/3 of people sticking in teams while a third move, it's okay. Okay, nearly there. So longer term, what happens? Well, this is maybe an interesting illustration of that. So if we say this model of the 6 teams before reteaming, they're all in their little groups by color, and then a third of people move after 1 year, and you can see how teams could start to talk to each other. So people are taking their personal sort of relationships with them as they go, and they're bringing their ideas. So Team Green is now someone in yellow who's brought with them ensemble programming or some other way of working that's working really well. So after 1 year, you do that. After 2 years, you start to see this wonderful multicolored aspect to your team, where there's people from a number of different teams a couple of years ago that have now joined the team. And then after 3 years, Team 6 has stopped, but Team 7 is here, and that drives a lot of change. Greenfield product, maybe, has drawn some change, and people have joined that team, which is, again, being filled in with maybe new people that join the organization to fill in the gaps. So this is simplified, but this is kind of what we've we've experienced. So after 4 years of reteaming, what have we seen? We've seen that reteaming is an established annual event. It's normal. People plan. Well, in the next reteam, I think I'm going to look to move teams. So they're thinking, we're expecting this to happen. We've proven to the business we can respond agilely, with agility, to their emerging needs and changing strategies. And we've proven we can do that while asking people where they'd like to work. And we've proven that people do want to change teams for personal development. A third to a quarter, there is that sort of met need in our teams, there was in our teams, to move around for personal development. They didn't want to stick in the teams. We have got better at forming teams and onboarding new joiners. There's still room to improve, of course there is, but having done this repeatedly for 4 years, when people join in the middle of the year, they find that more is written down. They find that we've got activities that help us and that new member get up to speed. We're getting better at it. And we can see, as I've said, good practices and behaviours are spreading between teams, which I've talked about already. Our people support the process. This matters to people. 100% of people think it's right in our organisation to give people an opportunity to influence where they work. And we found it's really positive for employer brand and hiring. Folks come to our interviews and they talk about reteam and they bring it up. So they're not just landing in a team in a new company and they'll be there forever. They know that they land into a system where they will get opportunity to move around, and that has value to them. So we've seen improvement in our kind of hiring stuff and also in retention. Okay, so hopefully I've given you a bit of a picture on how we do reteaming at Redgate. And maybe you want to give it a go, that would be fantastic. If you are going to, maybe buy Heidi's book, read a bit more about that, but also we've written quite a lot about it on our website, ingeniouslysimple.com, and I'll put that link up in a minute. Talk to leadership about it, especially if you're seeing those frailties of stagnant teams and how this approach might help that, and try and build some safety for everybody. Having that stage where actually we look at preferences and then see if that fits and it still creates teams that are fit for purpose and that meet the business needs. That's an important safety step that leadership might feel they need in order to give people more say. So build that kind of thing in. But don't just copy us, right? This is born out of our context, which is why I shared you, of an organisation of sort of that size, of those kind of principles. Don't copy us, but maybe there's some inspiration in here for you to give people a greater say. So these are some of the references I brought up, all excellent books. And that's my lot. So I'm very happy to answer questions, but if you want to run away, I understand as well. So thank you very much for your time.